If you've beaten Omori, you're definitely familiar with the ghost-like blob known as Something. Throughout the game, Something metaphorically and physically follows you through your whole journey in an attempt to make you confront the truth. Its influence over Sunny's mind is vast and slowly encroaching on headspace. This video is going to be an exploration of these creatures, going over their potential meanings, backstories, and whatever else they might represent. But first, we have to cover what the idea of something actually means. At a base level, something represents the physical manifestation of a guilty conscience. The first place you most clearly see this is through Basil's something. It's taken the form of a large black web entangling and consuming him. The metaphor on display here is very clear. Basil's being literally consumed by his own guilt. The gaping maw of something also overlaps exactly with where you feel guilt. That sensation is like a deep pit in your stomach, making you feel awkward and uncomfortable. Further backing this up is in the neutral ending where you decide not to save Basil. He takes by puncturing a hole in his stomach, and something's eye is left staring back at you through it. Secondly, something is ever present around Sunny and Basil. Its ever-presence and inescapability mirrors the feelings of guilt very closely. It's always watching you, always judging, always coming up at the most inconvenient of times, appearing just to amplify your problems. That's the main reason it's even called something. Even if you can't see it or can't recognize it, it's always there, watching you. This point is also backed up by the true route, where finally admitting the truth to your friends and showing care for Basil makes both the somethings disappear. Finally, something refuses to confront you directly. As much as it seems hostile throughout the story, something does nothing to directly hurt Sunny or Basil. It only fights back once, but even then, Sunny was the one who confronted it in the first place. All the different fights and fears related to something are caused by guilt's ability to trigger heightened emotions in people. Guilt can cause people to act more irrationally and erratically, but it never makes people act on its own volition. For example, if somebody's feeling angry or sad, feeling guilty can heighten these emotions to the point of acting violent or depressed. Something isn't your friend, but it isn't your enemy either. It's a neutral force that's just guiding you towards the truth. I've only discussed the broad idea behind something, but there's deeper symbolism tied to each of its different forms. Let's go look into them now. The most explicit one is the game's mascot, the blob ghost that follows Sunny throughout headspace and sometimes in the real world. The game outright tells you this with, "You shouldn't have looked back." The appendages and tail is Mori's hair draped over her face with a slight gap in the front. This gap allows one eye, turned sideways, to peer through the hair. It is an explicit reminder of what Sunny did. Trees, stairs, and pianos are common places for it to appear. These relate back to the incident or back to Mori. This form of something also manifests as the phobia bosses. Something in the dark, something in the walls, and something in the depths directly tie back to Mori and Sunny's relationship. When Sunny sees a stimulus to them in the real world, he gets a heightened reaction from his guilt associated with Mori. Of course, this is because Mori was the one who saved him from drowning and where these three phobias come from in the first place. They are a direct reminder that Mori is gone and she can't save Sunny anymore. While not as frequently appearing as Sunny something, Basil's something is a metaphor with multiple layers to it. I've already brought up the aspect of Basil's guilt swallowing him, but the other metaphor here is that of a web of lies. To explain why, we have to look into how Basil reacted to Mori's death. It's a common interpretation to say that each of the emotions in the game represents the different ways the friend group reacted to her death. For example, Sunny dissociated to the point of forgetting the truth, so his reaction corresponds with neutral. Basil didn't dissociate and became a nervous wreck because of it. He perfectly embodies the fear emotion. This fear manifested into him lying about the involvement with the incident for so long that he feels like he created a network of lies and misinformation. This is why his something is so large and appears to be a sticky web encroaching around him. The little ones are the tiny black blobs of something on the ground all throughout headspace and black space. You're able to run over them multiple times, hearing them whinge in pain with each step. Once you've gone over them about 17 times, they'll scream out before fading away forever. In the files, these are referred to as little Basils. Tied with the little ones apologizing after dying, it seems like these are fleeting regrets about Basil getting involved with Mori. Another interpretation is that these are the Basils that remembered the truth, being taken by Omori and being punished. We know Omori has the power to recreate these characters anytime he wants. This is proven through both all the Basils in Black Space, and all the skeletons of Kel, Hiro, Abbi, and Omori scattered throughout the game. You could argue these small skeletons aren't them, but each time they appear, one always has a pink bow in the same place as Aubrey's. Therefore, it's reasonable to assume that they've died over and over again. In a Cosmenian fashion, Omori could have manipulated and compressed Basil into an unrecognizable form. Seeing how much Omori hates Basil when he knows the truth, as evidenced by Black Space, it wouldn't surprise me if he's been doing this. Side note, how long have the extra Basils been in Black Space? We know the most recent version of Basil's in the Church of Something, so how long were the Watermelon area, Spider area, Raft area, and Neighbor area Basils held for? Are the strangers walking around the starting room of Black Space also Basil? How many goddamn Basils are there in Black Space? Those are what I'd all call the major somethings. Our next family is quite an interesting one. It's the menagerie found in the Red Space Zoo and Lost Library. These don't have quite as much going on for them, but equally they're more abstract than the other somethings. There's going to be a lot more theory crafting and hypotheticals than hard cold evidence. With limited stiff movements and a clay texture, these guys resemble shapes that are made during clay therapy. Clay therapy is the idea of expressing your emotions through shaping clay, and we can infer that Sunny did this because of the dry modeling clay in the box of junk he has to sort. If it was more meant to be Play-Doh, it wouldn't be described as modeling clay specifically. All these enemies are probably shapes he made to cope with Mari's death, and they all tie back to regrets or guilts about it. We know they tie directly to Mari because of their naming schemes. The creators went out of their way to choose names that end in Y but replace the Y with an I specifically to tie back to Mari. Let's interpret what all these shapes mean. Dorothy's the only variant something you're likely to run across in the main story of the game. You can find her on the train to Orange Oasis, in the Lost Library, and in the Red Space Zoo. Her shape is that of a four-legged animal that attacks by stomping and kicking. This immediately brings to the mind imagery of a deer, more specifically a doe, due to the lack of antlers. In many different cultures, deer can represent a few things like gracefulness, wisdom, and innocence. All of these are traits that Omori has put onto Headspace Mari. But out of the three, innocence grabs my attention in particular. The deer signals to me that Sunny feels bad about killing somebody who is innocent, really focusing on the fact that Mari didn't deserve this. Compared to Dorothy, Cindy looks much more like a human, only really lacking legs. Her proportions are more exaggerated humanoid than one-to-one humanoid. She's found in the Foggy Bridge, Lost Library, and Red Space Zoo. I've got two interpretations for Cindy. The first one is that she's supposed to resemble a weapon, such as a sword. The connection here isn't very subtle. Sunny feels bad because he killed someone. In that scenario, he was the weapon, so his guilt manifests as an actual weapon. My other idea is that Cindy represents a toy or a doll. This plays on the fact that she looks exaggerated as a humanoid and not one-to-one. Dolls are associated directly with children, so Cindy could be a manifestation of Sunny losing his childhood friend. It was because of Sunny's actions that he lost the most important part of his childhood, and of course he feels guilty about that. Lily doesn't resemble much. It looks more like a lumpy ball than anything. Interestingly, this is the only something that actually has more than one eye, having 16 visible ones from the player's perspective. It's likely that Lily's entire body is covered in eyes, but we can't tell from this angle. She is found in the Lost Library, Raintown, the Abyss, and the Red Space Zoo. Her weird eye count probably hints at there being something unique about her in specific. The little ones are a tiny blob with a single eye, so what if Lily's just a collection of little ones? The name might imply this as well. Lily and Little sound very similar. If you believe in the punished Basil theory, the All Tomorrows comparison holds even more water. They probably represent a coagulation about the guilt of Basil. One small feeling about it might be easy to suppress, but a large collection is not. Mercy appears as a humanoid, similar to Cindy. She has the appearance of a hunched-over person in a dress. She more so matches a one-to-one humanoid instead of a stylized one, though. In her overworld sprite, she appears almost ghost-like. You could only run into her in the Abyss and the Red Space Zoo. One idea I had about her could be that she represents the guilt Sunny feels for Mari saving him from the lake. Mari rescued him from drowning, and yet this is how he pays her back? If you exclude the Red Space Zoo, Mercy is only found underwater. So this probably backs up that interpretation. Mari gave mercy to Sunny, but Sunny didn't give mercy to Mari, and so this manifested as a creature named Mercy. Nancy is a mess of different concepts thrown together. It kind of resembles a spider, a cat, and her mouth kind of looks like a cavern with stalagmites. This is also the largest variant of something by a wide margin. You can specifically find her in the vast forest with the tire swing room and in the Red Space Zoo. As I've mentioned, this conglomeration of ideas doesn't really stand as one thing in particular. Something you could describe Nancy as, though, is monstrous. If you think of the cat ears as demon horns, this idea becomes even more clear. Nancy represents Sunny's guilt manifesting as him feeling like a monster. It's a very common metaphor when describing someone's actions as horrible. The cave mouth could also be a signifier about Sunny feeling bad about isolating from his friends. But the monster subtext is what's most clear here. Geez, where do I even start with this one? I saved Sally for last because of how abstract it is. Every other something takes on at least some sort of distinguishable shape, but I really have to use my imagination here. You can find her on the Foggy Bridge, Cattail Field Barn, Lost Library, and Red Space Zoo. I asked r/Omori, the Omori subreddit, for help, and I was able to narrow it down to 2 different interpretations. The most common reading I heard was that she's supposed to be a stretched out neck, which is a side effect of bodies hanging for a long period of time. I can see why one would believe this, but it leaves me unsatisfied for 2 reasons. Firstly, Sunny only saw Mari's hanging body once after the incident. If he saw it multiple times, or at least frequently enough to get some trauma from the actual neck stretching itself, then it would probably manifest into the main something a little more. Secondly, Sunny was not the one to prop her up on the tree, that was all Basil. He just helped carry Mari there. I don't think this is too thematically fitting. What I do think works a lot better is if it was meant to be a clump of Mari's hair. She was moved a relatively long distance by 2 children, and they definitely couldn't have been gentle with it. A piece of Mari's hair accidentally ripped out by Sunny may represent further trauma about how he harmed Mari. Sally is quite a strange one, to say the least. This brings us to our final category, which I've dubbed the somewhat somethings. These enemies resemble something in some way, but aren't actually something. Rather, they've been irreversibly warped by black space. While they're not directly related, they're just heavily implied to be. I'll be covering Angie and Abbi. One obviously has a lot more importance than the other, but I want to cover all my bases here. Angie is an anglerfish corrupted by black space. They've been transformed to the point of taking on the naming scheme of the other somethings without actually being one. This makes sense, seeing as Angie is found in the Abyss, the closest thing to black space. Angie also isn't composed of clay, instead defaulting to the sketchy art style of base headspace. The only other thing of note is that the anglerfish's normally bright lamp has been replaced with a pitch black one. It's almost reminiscent of the black light bulb in white space. That's all I could really glean, so let's just move on. Abbi is quite a strange case, to say the least. She's a gigantic creature with a large mass of tentacles. Despite having the same clay texture as the something variants seen previously, she clearly isn't one. This is because she's missing the distinctive something eye. Abbi's eyes are much more in line with the characters from Headspace as opposed to the characters from Black Space, and this perfectly lines up with her backstory. The Coral Branch says that after she found the truth, Abbi was locked away in a prison. Her memory was also completely wiped of the event. She was not created out of guilt, only subjected to torture after learning where it comes from. In the Omori route, we see her lash out at Omori for the way she's been treated, and when we beat her back, she begs for forgiveness. Based on all of the dialogue snippets within the game, I think I've pieced together her backstory for the most part. Due to a more introverted personality, Sunny didn't make many friends before being introduced to Kel and Hiro via Mari. This probably means he created an imaginary one, which would be Abbi. We can infer this because she's referred to as the wisest by the Coral Branch. My guess for wisest here would mean that she has knowledge about the real world, which is only something Sunny should know. As Sunny grew up, he didn't need an imaginary friend anymore, but Abbi, who was probably written with a Y at this point, lived on in Sunny's mind. After the incident, Sunny's dreams became more twisted and horrific, and he eventually needed Omori to deal with the trauma without overwhelming him. Omori, who wanted to build a safe environment for Sunny, began constructing Headspace. We see this through all the failed experimentation in the weather vane room. I'll get more into the weather vane room specifically in my timeline video, but just know it's important for the story. Abbi probably saw Headspace as a very unhealthy way of coping. and knowing the truth about what happened because she has access to the real world meant she was very inconvenient for Omori's goal. So she was banished to black space, eventually getting corrupted by the forces there. Some of this backstory is based on dialogue in game, while some of it is based on just educated guesses on what might have happened. Now, if Abbi was punished by being locked into the abyss, why would her tentacles be sticking through headspace? Abby's not exactly a guardian or anything, and if you converse with her after you beat her, she seems pretty frightened and clueless as to what's going on. Well, I have another theory to explain that, and this one's pretty crazy. When Omori built Headspace, I'm pretty sure he started with the vast forest. This is where Sunny and all of his friends could be kept without problems. But the vast forest is not very structurally sound on its own. Deepwell probably wasn't even a thing by the time of Abby's banishment. Based off the lore and boss fight, Abbi is one of the strongest beings in Headspace. We don't know Abby's original size, but based on some concept art, she seemed to be much more humanoid in size originally. So, what is Omori to do here? He has an unsupported vast forest and a giant squid at the bottom of the abyss. Well, what if Abbi was the thing originally holding Headspace up before Omori finished it? To construct anything, you need to have scaffolding and a central point to build around. And a long, powerful tentacle could serve as a perfect thing to do that with. But because the place is finished now, Abbi doesn't need to be used anymore. She probably still lingers around because she wants to see her old friend from time to time. Tell me what you think of this theory. It's been something I've been thinking about for a while. This concludes my breakdown of all the different types of something in Omori, from the ever-present to the fringe cases. If you think I missed anything, please let me know down below. I always appreciate any feedback. If you like analytical content like this on games, music, and shows, then why not hit like and subscribe? I'm working on some more Omori content as a way of tying up loose ends before my really big review, and my next project will probably be a timeline of Headspace. I've got a plethora of different theories about what exactly happened with its creation, and the Abbi one is just the first one I have. I've been Lexi, I'll see you around.